A couple of days ago, Russia lost an A-50 and suffered damage to an IL-22, and both of these aircraft are very valuable for the Russian Aerospace Forces, the VKS. And there is some debate as to what exactly happened. So in this video, I'm going to be summarizing what we know and crucially what we don't know, because, well, this is a developing situation where in a couple of days and months and years, we will certainly know more about this incident. So as this is a developing situation, I'm not going to be speculating. I'm going to stay completely with what we know. And if you want to add anything to this video, put it down in the comments and obviously cite your sources. You know what's up at Military Aviation History. And yes, my sources are also in the description below. And if you do enjoy this video, consider the whole YouTube mumbo jumbo thing with liking, subscribing, and you're on this platform long enough, you know exactly what to do. So what do we know? Well, an A-50 was shot down, this is pretty much confirmed, and an IL-22M was damaged. For the IL-22M, on some of the OSINT channels out there, you will also find some intercepted radio comms that apparently, allegedly originate from the IL-22M that specify that it is asking for assistance and that it is coming in for an emergency landing at their airfield. However, there's absolutely no way I can confirm the authenticity of this recording. But there is also some picture evidence that points to this aircraft after it having landed, showing some shrapnel damage on the tail. So it does appear that an IL-22M was indeed damaged. And there's also some information that potentially a Sukhoi 34 was also involved in this incident and that a missile was fired at this aircraft, although there's way less information available on that, so I'm going to completely omit that from this video. Now let's talk about the aircraft that were involved here. The A-50 mainstay is an AWACS type aircraft, so an airborne early warning and control aircraft. And basically, it's an aircraft that has a radar dish on top, and that provides, the ability to detect targets in the air and also on the ground at quite a distance, depending, of course, on the situation and what you're looking for and what you're trying to find and what the enemy countermeasures are in terms of electronic warfare. And crucially, it also provides some additional capabilities by looking, so to say, over the horizon, because ground-based radar dishes have problems picking up targets that are flying very low due to the curvature of the Earth. And if you have a high-flying radar dish, well, that can look down as well. And an A-50 can also then be used, just like any sort of NATO-type AWACS, to first of all detect, collect that information, and then hand off and share that information with other assets, either in the air or on the ground. So it's an exceptionally helpful tool to build up some situational awareness for a force. Then we have the IL-22M Coot. This aircraft is a derivative of the IL-18. There was a previous IL-22 that had that code, and this aircraft is an airborne command post, and it does exactly what's on the label. It oversees, coordinates, and commands subordinate assets in the area, and it also provides some additional capabilities for information sharing and relaying and all that stuff. So these aircraft basically, if you put them together, their function is both for command as well as building up situational awareness and sharing that within a force, which makes them exceptionally important. And people always talk sort of about the kinetic effectors, right? The bombs, the missiles, and the planes that drop those. But these aircraft are exceptionally valuable to a force, and that's why usually there's only a few of those available. And that's the case here as well with the A-50. Although around 40 were built, Russia operates less than 10. And the crew there ranges from 10 to 15 with an IL-22. We are also sitting at quite a low figure of aircraft and a crew of between 10 to 12. Okay, and that is basically what we know. We know an A-50 was shot down, an IL-22 was damaged, and we know what those aircraft represent for the VKS. Now you can say, of course, hey, hang on, there are claims here. The Russians are saying one thing and the Ukrainians are saying one thing. Yes, but we don't know exactly for sure what's going on. But let's go through that now, shall we? First of all, the first thing we have to recognize that there's an A-50 and an IL-22. Both of these aircraft, they're not going to be flying close to the front lines. Yeah, they're not basically multi-role, jet aircraft that can do sort of strike and air-to-air. They are flying at a distance from the front lines, and they're gathering intelligence, and they're building up situational awareness, and they're coordinating the forces in the area from that distance, which means that they're basically going to fly outside the range of long-range air defense systems. And Ukraine still potentially, although I don't know, of course, the stockpile number, still has some old, Soviet legacy long-range ground-to-air missiles or surface-to-air missiles, but recently has also, of course, been replacing those with NATO Patriot missiles and Patriot launch sites. So it's important to recognize these aircraft are not flying directly over the front lines, they're keeping a distance, and they have no direct participation in sort of the kinetic element of warfare where you're launching missiles or you're dropping bombs or doing any of that stuff. They're more in a support function or enabling function. Now this leads us to the question of who done it, right? So based on publicly available sources, we don't know who shot down the plane because one version stands against the other. Right now, Ukraine claims to have done it, leading to, of course, that speculation that it was Patriot missiles that shot down the A-50 and damaged the IL-22. And Russia is also claiming that they have done it as sort of friendly fire, right? And it seems that, and this is not the first time that Russia claims friendly fire, and it seems that the Russians are far more comfortable with saying, yeah, this incident was friendly fire, rather than admitting that the Ukrainians shut something down, which is quite interesting, but that also feeds into the whole information warfare aspect of this conflict that is, continuously evolving on social media, in mainstream media, and of course between these two governments. However, looking at some of the systems that are in play here, so first of all the aircraft and also the air defense systems that are existent in the area, there's a couple of things we can infer from that as an overall context. Now, as I said, I am not going to be speculating in this video. I never speculate in these videos that are on recent events, simply because we don't have the information available to make a real good, educated call, even a judgment call, because we don't have that information. But what we can say is this: if Ukraine did this with a Patriot missile, first of all, the Patriot system was of course credited in December of last year for the shoot down of 3 and potentially 4 Sukhoi 34s, and then in May of last year there was also another high profile event where a Patriot was credited with a number of aircraft, and in both cases it was sort of an SAM ambush against the enemy forces. So you can in fact lure planes in the way you develop your information system, the way you shape the battlefield, the way you place your SAM sites, and the way you also degrade the enemy's ability to identify those. So you can in fact lure aircraft into an area where suddenly you pop up and you fire a bunch of missiles and they can't do much. So this is of course possible. However, all those earlier incidents happened relatively closely at the front line. So if we look back at the one that is in December, that happened sort of in the southern, next to the Sea of Azov as well, but the southern region of Ukraine. And as far as I can find, the information that is available, it was between 20 to 40 kilometers off the front line, so fairly close with these Sukhoi 34s. However, this incident that we have, from all the information that I'm seeing right now, happened at a much further distance. And this makes sense because, as I said, those planes are going to keep their distance. And the distances that I can calculate now from some of the sources that I have in the description, so for example, the Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces showed sort of a tracking record of the different aircraft, and that puts one of them, the A-50, directly over the Sea of Azov, in the northern part of the Sea of Azov. We're speaking about ranges of, let's say, 150 to 200 kilometers from the front lines, and the SAM sites are not going to be directly on the front line. They're going to be at a slight distance from those. So could this have been Patriot? Yes and no, but it is a tricky shot. It is impossible for me to say, as a commenter on the internet, yes, this was Patriot or this was not Patriot. A claim like that is idiotic. But what I would say is that if it was Patriot, then it has to be coming together of various elements. First of all, Ukrainians have to shape the battlefield a bit so that the Russians don't exactly know where the SAM sites are, have potentially also degrade the ability of A-50 to pick up targets with EW, so the A-50 got closer to the front lines than maybe it should have. And the same thing for the IL-22. If radio comms were jammed a little bit, there is some evidence that the Ukrainians are having some success in jamming A-50, so that could have been the case, so that the planes then got closer to the front lines. It's also possible, the publicly available range data on Patriot Pack-2, which the Ukrainians have, I mean, there's always going to be some little bit plus and minus on those. But it is quite a tricky shot if the Ukrainians pull this off. But again, we don't exactly know. There are certain factors that may, in fact, have allowed them to do this with Patriot. But at the same time, it is a tricky shot from my observation. Then let's talk about, this potentially being, as the Russians claim, a friendly fire incident. So an A-50 and an IL-22, like I said, they're not just any aircraft. They're high-value command and control aircraft that really are tied in closely to the overall command structure of the Russian armed forces. And in order in order for the surface-to-air missiles to engage these specific targets, something has to go fundamentally wrong in the command chain from identifying over to then firing the missile. There's a lot of steps in there. That was my notification, not yours. And yes, of course, when we look at the war as a whole, there seems to be a certain trend amongst the Russian armed forces that coordination is somewhat lacking. However, in their vertical silos of their command structures, the coordination in the Russian armed forces, from everything I'm hearing, is getting a lot better than it was early on in the war. Remember, they're 2 years into this now. The Russians are also learning. Horizontally, they may not necessarily know that much, but considering that the IL-22M and the A-50 are potentially plugged into the air defense system as a whole in the area as well, because they're providing data and some information to them as well. Again, for something to go wrong there and for the very air defense systems to fire a missile at them is something else, right? And also, when we have to consider with the friendly fire incident is there are multiple aircrafts here. And from the information that I can see right now is that the IL-22 gets hit 10 minutes after the A-50. That again shows with the time delay, yes, I mean, maybe the missile travels a little bit further, and due to this, the time it takes for impact is longer. But 10 minutes does indicate that the launch perhaps wasn't at the same time, but somewhere with a slight delay. The radar signature that both of these aircraft relay back to the operators of the air defense should really tell them more or less what sort of target they are looking at. So again, it's a bizarre incident. I have to tell you this. It's just such a bizarre incident. So if this was friendly fire, does it hint at some real issues within the Russian armed forces? Yes, even though I would say that on the whole, if you look at some of the reports that are coming out now by credible sources that are doing real deep dives on the Russian armed forces, we actually do finding that the Russians are learning a lot from this war as well, and they're changing a lot of their procedures as well. So although the friendly fire version that Russia seems to prefer over the fact that the Ukrainians shot them down, maybe plays in the hand of some of the ideas that we have in our heads of the Russian armed forces. I'm not necessarily going to say that I just buy it just yet. But as I said, I don't want to speculate too much. I think both versions are, from the information that is available right now, incredibly hard to piece together. They're not mutually exclusive. And it's going to be very interesting to see what actually comes out of this in a couple of weeks or months and maybe years once we identify really what has happened. And now I'm handing it over to you as always. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this incident, what you think it tells us about potentially Ukrainian capabilities, but also the Russian armed forces and their air defense system. And as always, this is Military Aviation Histories. We don't just make statements, we cite. So if you update this video via comment, there's potentially a couple of things coming out in the following days that may in fact add to the things that I say here. Give us the link or tell us where you got this from, and that would be really appreciated. So as always, I wish all of you a great day and see you in the sky.